And a very good evening to everybody that has tuned in to this Saturday night tasting here with myself, the Whiskey Chaser Brian, and Christie's Bar. A second tasting that we've decided to put together of some really kind of unique, rare, and what I would be considered absolutely beautiful whiskeys. And we came up with this idea, as I said, if you were involved in the last tasting that we did, of something that was just special and of good value. And we wanted to kind of go through some really exciting whiskeys and bring you something different. And tonight is absolutely no different. So look, we're delighted to have you tuned in and watching. You have all got your samples. I have been in touch with everybody there on that side of things. And just before we go ahead, I want to say a big thank you to the lads in Christie's, of course, and my guest for this evening, co-host, I will say, who has been fantastic in kind of helping organizing and standing behind this 100%. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in what the main man, we could call him Mr. Whiskey himself, but I just bring him on. Dair Garland himself is here with us this evening to walk us through these fantastic whiskeys. Good evening, Gerard.
Hi, Brian. Great to be here.
Absolutely great to have you along. I have to say, I have been to, I would say, easily 15 different tastings that you've done throughout the years. And to have a tasting with you now this evening myself is kind of like a moment for me to see on screen as we're kind of going through this. So you're very welcome along. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and it's really brilliant to be here in Christie's. Well, I'm not really in Christie's, as you can see, you are, but I'd love nothing more to be in Kilkenny and in Christie's and with everyone here who's watching tonight. And we're going to have some great fun and some brilliant. This is some lineup, Brian, that the lads in Christie's and yourself have put together. So I'm delighted to be able to bring you all through the whiskies.
I'm delighted to have you here. I'll be honest, and I had said it to you before we were having a little chat. This was always something that I wanted to do, was to see how different, and not necessarily stack up against. I mean, they're all their own different whiskeys, obviously, but to see how they all differ when you sit them side by side to each other. And it's something I've always wanted to do, especially with the Dair Ghaelachs. And in fairness to the lads here, Christie's said, "Hey, let's do it. Why not?" So I'm excited.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because of little, nuances, little changes in production, different spirit types that are used. You will find a commonality across the whole Midleton range, and that's the use of American oak. But what you'll also find is just how different these whiskies are. Midleton to me is like elegant. It's the pinnacle of Irish whiskey. It's just that it's delicious, and I mean, it's just one of those amazing things. It's really simple. When people taste it, they go, "Oh wow, that's good." And that's the thing about Midleton. These are all good, but they're all so different in their own right.
Yeah, and you nailed it on the head there. They're so different. They're so good in their own right. And tonight we get a unique opportunity to be able to try a number of different expressions and put to test exactly what you just said there.
Yeah, well, do you know what? Why don't we just jump in, Brian? Because I'm delighted to be able to share with you the 38th edition of Midleton Very Rare 2021, which is #1 in your tasting pack. So if you're all at home, if you can take out bottle #1 and in your glass, number one there, and basically put it into a tasting vessel of some description. Put it into your shoe, your hat, put it into whatever you want.
Hopefully, hopefully you have something a little bit more kind of whiskey friendly besides a shoe.
Yeah, but look, the reason is, like, we're here for a whiskey tasting. So once you have a whiskey in your glass, I can tell you about the origins of Midleton, all that sort of crack as well. So MVR 2021 is the 38th edition of Midleton Very Rare, and it is the first from Kevin O'Gorman, our master distiller, and he is also still our head of maturation as well. And it's a whiskey that's going to go in a different direction than the previous master, which was Brian Nation. And Brian went on a different direction than Barry Crockett, our master distiller emeritus, and Barry went on a different direction than his father, Max Crockett. So this whiskey is multiple styles of pot still. In fact, all the main styles of pot still that we make in Midleton are in this whiskey, and it's a blend. So there's your signature grain that comes from Midleton. I have to keep stopping them from calling it standard grain. So it makes it sound so basic, because the same grain whiskey that goes in here, that goes into Jameson, that goes, but it really is some of the best whiskeys I've tasted. If some of you have tasted the Method of Madness, the single grain, the expensive one, the 31-year-old, you'll see what a unique spirit that it is. So you have.
I think I have it up there actually. It's just here behind me.
Oh, God, okay. Somewhere. It's a cracker. It's not like a whiskey at all, really. It's almost transferred into something like that's almost like a sugar cane, and it's kind of rum like. It's just so different.
Okay.
But in the
I've never had a sample.
Well, I might get you one. I think.
Okay.
Hey, no one else that's on here, but just you, Brian.
But that's on camera now. That's recorded.
Oh no, that's terrible. I shouldn't have said anything. So, but getting back to the Midleton Very Rare 2021, it's light pot Midleton. It's Midleton mod pot. There's also trad pot in here as well. That beautiful MMP4, as we call it. That very rare pot still that we have. And then it's a blend of grain whiskey as well. It's all American oak, as true to all the Midleton Very Rare vintages that are produced each year. It's multi-layered, and the whole idea is to take the best of maturation, because Kevin was head of maturation, and Brian's expressions were much more pot still forward. So it's more and the distillate as well. So it's really balanced between wood and pot still. So it took a number of months to develop, and he tasted like hundreds of samples to get to this point. And there's a higher proportion of grain than Brian's last year, which was over 80% grain. So 2020 was over 80%, because Brian was a distiller, so he liked to distillate driven. But as Midleton Very Rare is a blend of both pot still and grain, Kevin went in a different direction, and I think it's balanced between grain and pot still and wood and spirit as well. So let's have a look at it in the glass, and what gives me an indication of what it's going to feel like in the mouth is this lovely, the way it clings to the side of the glass, the viscosity of it. It's going to have a nice creamy full mouthfeel, and that's because it is mainly pot still, but a higher proportion of grain than last year. So let's have a little nose of it.
Sláinte. Oh, well, no nose, you said. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
And then, Brian, really excited. The anticipation. So I think of aromatic oils and, a little bit of vanilla, toffee, that sort of note.
It's very
as well.
Delicate, yeah, and
delicate, elegant, multi-layered. So there's loads going on in here. And the reason we're tasting
I actually remember.
Yeah.
I remember getting a kind of a salted caramel note and like a milk chocolate note off of this.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, there's always that toffee note in the background. I mean, You have vanilla as well, because it's
Yeah,
all American
vanilla.
oak, as I said. It's first fill and second fill American oak barrels, but all American oak. And also, it's the oldest whiskies ever used in Midleton. Very rare. It's 15 to 36 years old. So
I believe there
it's
was a nod of the cap from Kevin O'Gorman to Barry Crockett, that age
yeah,
style whiskey in this, I believe, wasn't there?
yeah,
I remember reading that in the press release.
yeah. So there is, there's whiskey, really, really old whiskey in here. So 36 years ago, what's that? That's 1986. So there's whiskey in here from 1986. So it's really, really, you know, very expensive old whiskey is in here. And basically, there's a nuttiness as well that I get here as well. Vanilla, green banana, yeah, definitely conquer. I get that
Yeah.
that banana note there. Kiwi as well. I don't know if you get that kind of citrusy
I
kiwi.
get more of a kind of a tropical fruit off of it than an
Yeah,
exact kind of. It's that very vibrant kind of light. And now, what doesn't actually come across to me, and this is where I kind of differ in times, is that nuttiness I don't get. But
yeah.
that's what makes it so beautiful. Then everybody's so different with their, their tastings and their nosings and their.
Well, I should actually say I mean nutmeg as opposed to
Okay.
nutty. So not hazelnut, or it's like nutmeg. When you grate nutmeg, you have
Okay.
that type of hint.
Yes.
Anyway, that's enough of smelling it. that's
Yeah,
that's
I
all I
was
think.
jumping the gun. Huh?
So go for the sláinte there, Brian. Yeah, I'll
All
let you
right,
do that.
sláinte, lads. Let's get it
Sláinte.
in, everyone. Sláinte.
Mm. Unmistakably high in pot still. You could definitely get that, but there is a little effervescence on the side of the tongue from the
Yeah.
grain whiskey. But it is there's loads of texture, loads of different texture going on. It's round, it's creamy. It's like cocoa powder bitterness to it. It's got a kind of a clovey type note to it as well.
It's very,
Again,
it's light, but it's oily.
it is simple and complex, and it's
Yeah.
balanced. So you're getting wood spice, you're getting spirit spice, you're getting the spirit and the wood almost perfectly working in harmony, and it's just wonderful, complex, elegant, all those different things. And do you know what? If I could afford it, I'd probably drink it every day, but I can't. But it is,
Yeah,
it's
well, this
really,
is
really
it.
good.
Very good. I think that the spices nicely. It's not overpowering. I think it it kind of ties in with the nice honey notes and those kind of vanilla notes as well. Everything is kind of well balanced across it.
Yeah, it is. It's really well balanced, and I mean, it is also, very accessible as well, Brian. You don't need to be a whiskey connoisseur. It's 40% ABV, and it just really is. There's a lot for a 40% ABV whiskey. You really feel like this could be 46%. It's it's something that is just, yeah. I think it's elegant, as I said before. Like, it's elegant, complex, multi-layered. Yeah, really, really good stuff.
Multi-layered. Yeah, it is good stuff, and there's not much to say about it, only that it is really good stuff, and it's really exploded in the last number of, well, I suppose
Months.
more months, more, yeah.
Yeah,
But with the people collecting and it's gone through the
yeah.
roof. The secondary market value and just the collectability of the whole whiskey, and people have really just gone mental.
Yeah, I think it's just hit a point of critical mass, if you want to call it that. There's both, as you said, it's become very collectible, and people. For me, if you were looking to put a few quid aside somewhere, I'd be looking at the 20th anniversary, the 1973, the 26th anniversary, all of those guys, that are, in my mind, yeah, that's for me is probably where I would see, in the future, that's where those Irish whiskies that you have behind you in the cabinet
Yeah.
are going to be really, I think they'll be really valuable in the future. So the reason, I suppose, it is so collectible is because we can only produce limited amounts every year, because although there is over 1.8 million barrels of whiskey and spirit in Midleton and Dungourney, the whiskies that are suitable for Midleton Very Rare, there is only between 500 and 600 barrels out of those 1.8 million that are suitable to go into Midleton Very Rare every year. And those are whittled down to about 400, and then those 400 are whittled down to somewhere between 200 and 250 barrels.
Wow.
And if you think about a barrel that's 15 to 36 years old, Brian, you've got a lot of angel share that's gone out of the whiskey. So it means that it's not 200 liters by 250 barrels. It's, you know, it's going to be much less than that.
Oh, much less. Yeah.
So
that must be some job though for people to get your head around. Just trying. Yeah, I would imagine it would be a fantastic job below Midleton, all right. But to kind of go through all those casks and you know, whittle it down to you know, a number that is feasible that reaches targets to work with, has to be. I don't want to say daunting, because obviously drinking whiskey is not daunting, but like, I mean, it would come across to me as a monumental task.
So there's 4 lads who their job is essentially to, if a warrant, which is basically a request to get samples, is sent. Now, it used to be a physical piece of paper, but now it's an email. So a warrant is sent to these lads. They work 12-hour shifts, 4 days a week, and they work, you know, so they work opposite to each other, and they work in shifts of 2 people, and basically their job is to go around scanning for leakages. So they use heat sensitive equipment, you know, cameras to check for leaks, and they also take samples. So Billy Lighton, our head blender, and Dave McCabe, our other blender, and Deirdre, our new blender, they would request certain samples around certain areas of the distillery. And from time to time, they'll come across, because these guys are very experienced, they happen to be men, you know, but we've lots of women working in the distillery, but this crew happen to be men. And the 4 of them, they, you know, they have a good nose, they know what they're looking for. They drill a tiny little hole into the barrel, and then they get a bottle very similar to the bottles you sent us, Brian, and they'll, you know, the little hole will, you know, obviously whiskey will come out and fill the bottle. They'll put the cap on, they'll write the location of it, what the barrel was, you know, all the information from the barrel on it, and they'll go and inform our blenders out of a batch that they've selected, this one is actually a really good barrel. And this is the magic of what happens in a barrel, Brian. Every barrel is unique, because every barrel, although the spirit that goes in is exactly the same in a group of barrels that have been filled, what happens inside the barrel is you have a barrel that's made up of multiple trees. You know, one tree was a little bit shaded in the forest, another tree got a lot more sunshine, another one was a little bit in the gravelly soil, and they have all different unique levels of wood compounds in there that contribute different characteristics to the whiskey. So what will happen is they'll, over the year, they'll put aside these, you know, as I said, these 300-400, possibly 500 different samples, and then the blenders just whittle them down, present them to Kevin O'Gorman. I nearly said Brian Nation there. Kevin O'Gorman.
You nearly did.
Nearly did. And then he would sit down and he would literally he would allocate time. And because the guy is so busy, he was doing this at weekends. So he was taking a Saturday and he'd go in for a couple of hours and he'd nose them. Now, not taste them, nose them. And eventually he whittled it down to about 300 and then down to about 250, between 250 and 200. So that's the process. And it is done every year. And obviously Brian would have worked very closely with Kevin previously. So Kevin had all this knowledge. He knew how to engage in a process, and the blenders give them the steer then. So that's how we come upon Midleton Very Rare. And the reason we don't have an endless supply, even though people say there's loads of barrels down there in Midleton, and yeah, there is, but they go into Jameson, and Jameson is, we sell loads of Jameson. So the majority of that whiskey in Midleton is rotated between, you know, kind of 4 to 7 years. So it's rotated constantly. So hopefully
I saw a very good.
It's rare. Yeah.
It does, yeah, absolutely, yeah. A better understanding now that we're talking about it. I saw a very good picture during the week that the Midleton Very Rare Instagram page put up. Was I believe it was the site at Dungorney. I think, if I'm not right, now that
That's
was
right.
incredible. The
Isn't it amazing?
amount of what you know, I want to say storage areas, but obviously there were sheds, that big, massive shed. How many would they store each, I suppose?
So so there's 18,600 barrels in each cell of the warehouse. So that physical building you see is actually two cells, so A and B. So say it's warehouse number one. It's warehouse 1A and 1B, and that physical block, that rectangular building. And each cell has 18,600 barrels. So 33,200 or something. I don't know. It's terrible. I can't add 36,000 or something. I don't know. But it basically,
incredible.
That's what's in there. And then each warehouse would have multiple spirit types and multiple types of barrels. Like the majority of our barrels are ex-bourbon, so ex-Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee whiskey barrels. So that's the majority of the barrels that we have there. But they would also have some sherry barrels in there as well. And the reason for that is we spread the portfolio of barrels that we have around, of the whiskies that we have around all the warehousing. Because God forbid, touch wood, there was ever a fire or something happened to one of the warehouses, we would only lose a small proportion of that particular spirit or whiskey. It's just a kind of a
so it's kind of a mirrored system, really. Is it
exactly. It's building resilience into the storage of the barrels. So you know, I just, you know what I might do is just give you a quick history of Midleton Very Rare while people are sipping on 2021, and when we get to maybe, hopefully this works. So we tried it earlier, didn't we?
We did. Send it on there. It's not connected at the minute, but we
I go. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah. I just had a question there before we kind of go any further. When you were talking about the different styles of the different master distillers, so obviously Kevin O'Gorman, Brian Nation, and Barry Crockett. What when you break it down between the three, what kind of avenues did each one go down? So obviously we knew that this is Kevin O'Gorman's first one. It's a little bit more grain style whiskies, and that's what he wanted to portray in this one. So, well, if you wouldn't mind,
it's not more grain whiskey. Basically, he wanted more of a balance between the pot still and the grain, and the three types of pot still and the grain, as opposed to where Brian's was very much pot still forward. So, and that was just his, you know, giving his characteristic on it. And then and look, how many people are going to try the 2020, Brian? Because there was a quarter of the 2020, so little of it. But it is very much in the vein of his, you know, of the 3 or 4 previous expressions that he produced. Barry would have been, I would say Kevin's style is more like Barry's, but Barry didn't have the age of whiskey that Kevin has to play with. Because all the whiskey in Midleton Very Rare comes from the new Midleton Distillery. So if you think about Midleton Very Rare in 1984, it was whiskey that was, you know, probably 8 years of age. You know,
I read somewhere that did Barry not use some of the whiskey that came from the old Midleton Distillery?
In Dungorney, did it? Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
In Dungorney.
Okay.
Yeah. No, Midleton Very Rare has only ever contained whiskey produced in the new Midleton Distillery. There is an older Midleton product that had whiskey from the old Midleton Distillery. Unfortunately, we're not going to try this tonight. So,
you can send me a sample of that if you want.
Oh yeah, no problem. So basically, but that's a totally different product. That was from the old Midleton Distillery. So it was Midleton whiskey from Midleton Distillery, if that makes sense, as opposed to Midleton Very Rare. So Barry didn't have the same age range that Kevin has had and that Brian has had. You know, they're different people. We're all different, so they're going to put their own stamp on it, and that's the beauty of it, you know. And sure. What was I going to say to you? That Yeah, I can't find. It doesn't matter. I can't find that thing anyway, so it won't share. So it doesn't matter at all.
Oh, that's
So
strange. It worked earlier. That's weird.
yeah, it was weird. Yeah, it's strange. Have a look. I'll try it again.
Try one more time
So
there and see if we can get it.
yeah, because it's just to see the images of Barry Crockett and the lads. Oh, there it is. Oh, brilliant. Okay, let's have it. Is it coming up?
There we are now.
Oh, listen, that's great. So I just want to show you a couple of images that might be interesting to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so basically what we're looking at. So you tell me if this moves along.
Yeah, it's moving along perfectly.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've done the 38 expression of Midleton Very Rare. That was it. Lovely stuff. I still got it in my glass. I'm really enjoying it. Look, Midleton's a tale of four masters, basically. So this gentleman here is Barry Crockett's father, Max Crockett. And Max was from Cork City, and he married a lady called Nora Barry from Dungourney. And they had a son called Barry Crockett, who was named after his mother's grandfather. So basically, Max married Nora Barry from Dungourney. They had a son called Barry, and Barry became became our third master distiller. But Max first started off working in Cork City in the Watercourse Distillery, and then Norbert Murphy, who was the chairman of Cork Distilleries company at the time, saw the talent in Max, and he was brought in as assistant distiller out in Midleton in their other distillery, Cork Distilleries distillery, one of their distilleries. They had one in North Mal as well, but there was a fire that stopped distilling there, and we had a bottling plant there to 2004. And basically Max moved out to Midleton, and he had his family there. Barry had three sisters, and then Barry went into the family business. He became a distiller, and this is Barry here, the amazing man that he is. He's just such a gentleman. And Barry went to work in 1974 under Norbert, when Irish Distillers were formed basically in 1966, and it meant that essentially what they did was to ensure the culture that you had. Cork is a very independent place, and then you had two distilleries in Dublin, the Jameson Distillery and the Powers Distillery. So to ensure kind of people working together, they moved people to work in different parts of the business. So in the Powers Distillery, Barry Crockett was sent up to work for Clement Ryan, who was a direct descendant of James Power, the founder of the Powers Distillery, whose son John Power's signature is on the bottle. And Barry worked up in the distillery, and then he came back down to Midleton, and he worked on the commissioning of the new distillery with his father in 1975, and it went fully operational in 1976. And then he created Midleton Very Rare in 1984, and basically the first Midleton Very Rare was 34 barrels of whiskey, and it was 40 pounds a bottle. Can you believe that? So it's just amazing.
One would say bargain.
Yeah,
40 pounds.
It is. Yeah, well, 40 pounds in 1984 was probably very, very expensive. And then obviously Brian Nation took over from Barry after Barry nearly 4 decades in the business. Yeah. Just absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and we might talk a little bit about a little bit about Barry Crockett as well. So we're going to go on to whiskey number 2. That's Barry Crockett, and it's Brian. It's Barry Crockett's whiskey birthday. Would you believe?
I do believe.
Yeah, so it's 10 years old.
I mean, how is that for timing? 10 years old today. How is that for timing?
10 years old today, and Barry Crockett legacy was created as a legacy whiskey for Barry Crockett himself. So he invented Midleton Very Rare in 1984. And talking to Barry, I asked him what inspired the creation, and Barry said to me a very poetic answer that it was basically to reflect the people and the distillery and the countryside around it in that part of East Cork. So he wanted the barley, the sunshine at his back while he was playing by the Dungorney River, the sights, the smells, the people to be reflected in the whiskey. And I did not expect that description of why he created Midleton Very Rare. And it was originally created as a travel retail product for the duty-free shop in Shannon, and duty-free in Dublin and Cork as well at the time, because there were flights to the US at the time from those airports. And you know, if you want to make something popular in Ireland, Brian, the best way to do it is make it in Ireland, put it in a plane or a boat, and send it somewhere so Irish people can't buy it. And
yeah,
it'll
make sure first and foremost, make sure Irish people can't buy it.
And then people go mad for it. So Midleton Very Rare started appearing on back bars around Ireland, and then Irish Distillers, the company I've worked for 2 decades, decided that they would, you know, it'd be a good idea maybe to sell it ourselves in the country. So and
it worked. It worked well for you.
It has worked very well, and it really is just a fantastic whiskey. So let's put whiskey number 2 in our glass, Barry Crockett Legacy, a very different whiskey than the first one.
I just want to say to everyone there, if you could, by any chance, keep a touch of the previous whiskey as we're moving on.
Good idea.
I made a few notes last night as I was kind of just trying out a few different whiskeys. And when I kind of went back to each one, then afterwards, I found that there was an amplified nose, or you're kind of really kind of seeing the differences in the whiskeys as we move on. So just even a small little nub in the bottom of the glass to kind of keep you.
That's a great idea. And you know what the thing is about it is just to explain that this whiskey is very different than the first whiskey we tried. Yeah. One thing is that it doesn't change from batch to batch. The idea is that it is a whiskey expression as opposed to a vintage release which changes each year. So this is also a single pot still whiskey. So it's only it is only made from malted barley and barley, and our mash bill is 60-40, so 60% barley and 40% malted barley. And basically the whiskey itself is again only aged in ex-American whiskey barrels as well, and it is a whiskey that it was launched in 2011, and it was launched at the same time as Powers, John's Lane, and Green Spot, I think. So really talk about 3 powerhouses of whiskies to be launched in around the same day.
1 second now, Gerard. I think we have you're after freezing your camera there. I don't know. Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you fine. Yeah. Am I back?
No, kind of the last bit of you there. Now I kind of lost all of. Now I can see you. Now I can. It kind of went a bit mental for a second there. I couldn't make a head nor tail of what you were saying, to be honest with you.
That's normal, Ryan. So that's is that back?
There's a serious delay on the line there. Yeah, but we might be okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you fine. Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay. Well, everyone's saying we can hear you, so maybe it was just me here. I might have had a little hiccup in the internet there. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut across you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. No,
I thought everybody else couldn't hear you.
I was just saying that, you know, Barry Crockett Legacy. The idea is, you know, that it is a whiskey that's going to be the same each batch, and it was launched 10 years ago, and basically, you know, the idea behind it was to create a whiskey that would be very much I suppose a pay homage to Barry and his 4 decades in the whiskey industry, and like not just, you know, really you know, not just in the Irish whiskey industry. He is an absolute legend in the whiskey world. Like, you know, there's no doubt about it. So Barry Crockett Legacy. Let's have a little taste of it first, I suppose. A little nose of it.
Nose of it. You're jumping ahead like I was. If my information is correct, he's only the second ever. This is only the second ever bottling to have a distiller's name on the label beside John Jameson. Am I correct in saying that?
God, I don't know. You're
second,
probably right. Yeah.
The second ever distiller, would say, I know Jameson had obviously John Jameson, but Barry Crockett, I read that somewhere that he was only the second ever master distiller to have his name on a bottle of whiskey produced by Irish distillers, and the first one by Jameson and the whole group there, and the first one was John Jameson.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Yeah, probably. Like, I don't think the Powers ever professed to be distillers themselves. They had distillers working for them, So, and like Paddy Flaherty, or you think of Cork Distillery's whiskey. I don't think that the Murphys ever had their signatures on the labels. So yeah, I think you're probably right, Brian. It was usually the brand was first. John Jameson and John Jameson the second were distillers, so they actually physically did do distillation. So you're probably right.
There you go.
There's a nice factoid. Thank you very much, Brian.
No,
appreciate that.
You're all very welcome.
So Brian made a good point about having two whiskies side by side. So I have the Midleton Very Rare here in my right hand and the Barry Crockett in my left hand, and it's a night and day, totally different. So the Barry Crockett is going to be not as multi-layered as the Midleton Very Rare 2021, because that has 3 different pots of distillates in it, a grain whiskey, first and second fill bourbon. But what's unique about the Barry Crockett is that it is mainly first fill bourbon, but there's also a proportion of the whiskey that is transferred into virgin American oak as well.
Okay.
So basically that gives it a whole new dimension, basically, and that's what's unique about it. Whereas in and as I said, it's consistent from time to time as well. But really, a really interesting whiskey. There's also a distillate that's in here that is only in Barry Crockett legacy. So there's a unique distillate in here, and that's I suppose something really interesting about Barry Crockett legacy, that it does have a distillate that Barry created that is only in this whiskey. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? So that
is good. That's cool.
Yeah,
I get it's very, very heavy on the fruitiness.
It is. It's really kind of like green berries, that type of note to it.
Yeah,
it's very deep. It's got a deep kind of character to it.
I even have a slightly kind of floral hint note to it.
I know what you mean. Yeah. It's much more herbaceous than the Midleton Very Rare.
That would be a better word to use, Gerard, for play.
But there's definitely a charred wood. Do you get that? The charred wood note to it?
Yeah.
Because
woody. Yeah.
That virgin American oak is going to really, that charred wood note is really going to come through.
Beautiful on the nose, really kind of a bit heavier on the nose, I would say, than the Midleton Very Rare.
More spice, but because it's a pot still, pepper, spice, all that sort of stuff. Now look at it in the glass; it's even more viscous than the previous whiskey.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's have a sip. My mouth is watering now, so let's have a sip. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Really pot still, spicy, deep texture. That 2 fingers of pot still spice.
Beautiful.
Creamy, buttery in the mouth. Loads
Sweet cream,
of
butter,
sugar,
caramel.
Yeah, all that's going on, and that lovely wood bitterness at the back again makes you want to re-experience that sweetness. There's good balance between the spice of the spirit and the wood in the back.
Yeah.
Huge length. Do you feel how long that is? Just going
Yeah.
on and on.
Stay going. And this is a higher ABV than this is 46% ABV, whereas the Midleton Very Rare was 20 or not 20%, 40%. Excuse me.
Yeah, 40%. So higher ABV, it's going to carry a little bit more flavor. You know, alcohol is a big proportion of this. So you have more alcohol, you have more of that, that flavor from the spirit, which already as a base, the pot still spirit would have a lovely plummy, fruity, barley, biscuity note to it, unaged.
Yeah.
And so that is transferred on here, and the wood has enhanced that, and it has developed more flavors, and it's a cracker of a whiskey. It's really, really good.
Cracker. It is brilliant.
Yeah. 250 quid a bottle, and I know it sounds like it is a lot of money, but I think for something that's available, pretty much all the time, I think it's really good value if you're treating yourself. It's no nonsense. It's just really, really good drinking whiskey.
And again, a non-age statement whiskey. So what kind of what year? What's the age profile variation between casks that you guys use?
It's 10 to 22 years. Brian, is the age. The virgin oak age pot still is 16 to 20 years old, about that age.
Okay.
So it's that. So that 4-year period, 16 to 20 years old, is the virgin, and then the rest of the whiskey is 10 to 22. And the reason there's no age on it is so that they can keep consistency in the whiskey, keep it the same every year, so that they can higher the age or lower the age, or they can, if they had to keep it to an age statement, it'd be much more difficult to keep that consistency. But again, the transparency from Midleton is really, fantastic. They tell you exactly how it's made, what goes in it. There's no smokes or mirrors or anything hidden here. So basically, that's it basically. So hopefully that.
A question. You said that there's a distillate that is used in this whiskey that's not used in any other types of whiskey that Midleton produce. I thought there was 4 different types of distillate that Midleton used, but then I heard there was 3 different types. And that's between the entire ranges.
Yeah, I think that's a confusion between trad pot and MMP4, which are one and the same thing. Then we have MMP1, which is mod pot, which is something like you'd find in green spot. Trad pot would be like something you'd find in Jameson 15-year-old Millennium Edition. That was all trad pot. So the recent Redbreast 10-year-old are the healthy schlap of Redbreast of that trad pot. So it is it's expensive to produce. There's a narrower cut. There's a longer distillation time. So that's why it isn't produced. The mod pot is the one we'd spend a lot more time making, and then light pot Midleton is if you Powers John's Lane or Powers Three Swallows, all light pot Midleton. So and light does not mean that it means it's light in mouthfeel, not light in impact. As you know, Powers is spicy, sweet, honeyed, but it has a light distillate forward, but it's lighter in the mouth. Whereas trad pot is really heavy, and we call that a heavy style of pot still.
Very dense.
And then mod pot is in the middle of the road. It's kind of green spot is example, and green spot, yellow spot, red spot, and blue spot are all mod pot or MMP1. And then
I made that mistake before. I thought there was 4, and because I was getting trad pot and heavy pot confused.
No, they do, and of course in the micro distillery they've done everything. So you could rye. They've done pot still with rye, pot still with wheat, pot still with rye and wheat. They've done, they've done oats. They've done, they've double distilled, triple distilled. They've done absolutely everything. Every combination, permutation, they're experimenting there. So hopefully new styles. But the 3 main styles we make are those ones I talked about: the light pot, the mod pot, and the trad pot. And then your grain whiskey, which obviously is the one that we make loads of, and we also have contracts with other distilleries where we supply them with grain whiskey, which is no secret about that either.
And I was actually speaking to someone about that recently, and they had no idea that another distillery used the grain from Midleton to produce their blended whiskey.
Yeah, yeah,
The first time
absolutely.
I heard of it, yeah. It was interesting to see though. And there's so many small little kind of secrets and caveats in the whiskey industry, and everybody hears different things all the time. And it really just kind of makes it that little bit more community based where people share information, and it becomes, you know, like I don't want to say cult following, but it becomes people get very interested very fast.
Yeah, it does. Whiskey is a really complicated process with loads of history,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it really challenging, but also really interesting. So there is a really there's such a rich depth of stuff to find out that you like. I'm constantly learning. If I think about myself in 2014 about my whiskey knowledge then and what I know now, I don't know the half of it, Brian, and I'm still
Yeah.
learning all the time.
I'm
But I
the,
have the
I'm the
advantage of
same.
being, yeah, you know, I have the advantage of working for, you know, the whiskey that at the moment, in my opinion, makes the best whiskey in Ireland, if not in Europe, you know. So that's my opinion, and I'm totally biased. I know it is, but
You are biased, yeah.
yeah, but we will. You know, the brilliant thing is you have Ballykeefe and Kilkenny, you have you know, you have Royal Oak and Carlow, you have Waterford and Waterford, you have, you know, all of these
Blackwater and
other
Waterford as well. There's so many,
Blackwater and Waterford, so
yeah,
many amazing distilleries that are so close to where you are now, and they'll all, you know, just the problem with whiskey. And again, I'll go back to Barry Crockett because it is Barry Crockett legacy. Nothing in whiskey, um, uh, nothing in whiskey happens in a year. It takes decades to affect change, not 10 years, multiples of that. So decades to really affect change. And what we're seeing now is the first decade of maybe in 2 more decades, we might see regionality, we might see a particular style that Ireland will get known for that we don't know what that is yet.
yeah,
You know, so
yeah.
I mean, it's so exciting. Like, you know,
It is.
Jesus,
The
if you're not into
resurgence is
whiskey,
incredibly exciting.
yeah, it's really exciting. So,
Yeah,
and you know, and I feel just very glad to work for a distillery that helps a lot of these distillery has helped and will continue to help a lot of these smaller distilleries. And I think the Irish Whiskey Association's buddy system, where they match up bigger distilleries with smaller distilleries, is really just a really cool idea. Because we have been in existence in some shape or form for over 240 years. Isn't that crazy? So, you know,
crazy.
it's 242 years of knowledge being handed down. You know, like I just showed you Max Crockett to Barry Crockett to Brian Nation to Kevin O'Gorman.
Yeah.
Like that's nearly 70 years, you know, but we have another four times that or three times that, you know. So, and what I'm saying
And
is that
funnily enough, it nearly all got lost. Nearly.
nearly, and you would,
Yeah.
if those guys hadn't had that meeting down in Waterford over dinner, if the Powers, the Murphys, and the Jamisons hadn't agreed to form United Distillers in 1966, which quickly became Irish Distillers the following year, I don't think we'd have a whiskey industry anymore. So there wouldn't be a market for the new distilleries to sell into. And, you know, it's just absolutely fantastic. I love trying all these new whiskies and visiting these new distilleries and when we're allowed. But yeah, so that's my
Soon,
my piece
hopefully.
on it. And
Yeah.
Barry's very much part of that, because if Barry and his father hadn't laid down pots of whiskey, you would not be drinking this today, and you probably wouldn't be drinking. You wouldn't drink in any of the whiskies we're drinking today, but you wouldn't be. You know, Redbreast wouldn't exist.
No.
You know. You
Well,
know.
the Irish landscape, the Irish whiskey landscape would certainly look a whole lot different from every aspect. Certainly, but I would take from that.
Yeah. So look, you know, that's Barry. Amazing, just such an amazing man. He really is. So I'm going to quickly share my screen again and just quickly show you.
Go for it.
We're gonna share a screen. So let me see. So we're gonna
We'll
look
share that, and
at
then we'll drive on to the Dair Ghaelachs. Then we have
exactly.
three left.
That's where we're going. So this is Brian Nation, our master distiller, emeritus, our second one. So Brian is working now for a distillery based in Minnesota, and he is literally building a distillery at the moment. So he left last summer. He's very much, he's still in Cork, by the way, because of obviously the situation with COVID and all that sort of stuff. And you know, Kevin and himself are very much in contact, I'd say, and they're great friends. So Brian is just, Kevin took over from Brian, and luckily they'd worked together for years, you know, in a collaborative way, as they do in Midleton. They all, when they are looking at the spirits, they have a weekly meeting where they sit down and they look at all of the distillate that's been produced, and also selection of new products, you know, possible new products that are going to come out, new whiskies that I'm talking about. And they sit down and they'll all nose about 200 different samples. And it'll be everyone from Kevin O'Gorman to, you know, the likes of Dave Quinn, our Master of Whiskey Science, and Finbar Curran, our wood procurement manager, who is, you know, basically running the wood management program at the moment, as well as the blenders Billy and Dave McCabe, and our new blender Deirdre as well. So that's Brian. So Brian obviously had a selection of Midleton Very Rare under his stewardship, and he also saw the repackaging of the product as well in 2017. So it moved from into this new packaging that we have now today. And then Kevin O'Gorman is now our master distiller and head of maturation, and he's a native of Mitchelstown in North Cork. Brian is from Brian's from the city, and obviously Barry was from Midleton. So Kevin is from a little further up the road in Cork. He still lives there, just underneath the Galtee mountains, and he is just an incredible man with nearly 30 years in the drinks industry, and over 20 years and nearly 25 years in Irish distillers. And the reason I'm talking about Kevin is because Kevin was the person essentially behind the, in collaboration with Gerard Buckley, our master cooper, behind the Dair Ghaelach project. So American and Irish oak. So I said, like, they're all American oak so far. But you see Gerard Buckley here, has this hand on a barrel, but the barrel directly behind him is a hogshead. So it's a 246 litre Irish oak barrel. So literally, he's standing in front of it, but that's his hogshead there. And he has a wine barrock with his hand on it, and then a sherry butt to the right of that then again. So Ger is a 5th generation master cooper, and essentially they worked with a company called Purser, Turned and Russell, who are foresters in County Wicklow, on the Dair Ghaelach project. So Dair Ghaelach is an Irish oak matured whiskey. So the idea is that we will, you know, have a really good base whiskey. So in the case of the first Dair Ghaelach, which is Grinsos Wood, which is in Ballatoban in County Kilkenny, South Kilkenny, near Cappoquin. I think it's very close to Cappoquin, but it's in County Kilkenny, and it's an estate there that's been in the same family for was it 5 generations or something like that. But it is one of these old estates, and this is really, when they started the project, Brian, the idea was we'll have a Dair Ghaelach from every county in Ireland. We'll have 32 Dair Ghaelachs, but it was really, really hard to find oak forests that were sustainable, that we could actually fell trees, you know, mature ancient oak forests. And the forests in Grinsos Wood are like 2 millennia old, which is incredible. So when the estate was formed, those forests were protected because the landowner could afford not to fell the wood. You know, there was huge deforestation in Ireland over the last 500 years because ancestors like mine, who, you know, would have been smallholders in the state in County Kildare, they would have the minute they got a bit of leased a bit of land, the first thing they did was fell trees to sell them, to buy seed, to buy an animal maybe, or two animals, and but they never saw trees as a long-term crop. Whereas in France, in Spain, they saw trees as a long-term sustainable crop, or they just had loads of them. So in Ireland, unfortunately, a lot of our oak forests were felled and sold out of just necessity and discontinued on for hundreds of years. And you look at pictures, yourself, you look at pictures from the early 20th century or late 19th century, there's never any bloody trees in them because they were all chopped down. You look at the Mall in Kilkenny, there's nice trees up there. And you look at photos from 100 years ago, there's no trees because they're all chopped down. So the idea was, we worked with this forestry consultant, and what we say is the Irish Forestry Service, but seeing as we're in Ireland, that's Gaelach. So we've said that because no one has a clue what Gaelach is outside of Ireland. So we are, every tree that's felled, there's at least 10 trees planted, and that is in the hope that 5 of them will die. You're left with 5 more. One will die of disease, one will get burnt, and then hopefully there'll be 2 trees left. So the idea is that
that's the way they work it,
yeah, they work it. And also it's actually important with these 130-year-old Irish oak trees that you clear a bit of canopy above to allow the juvenile trees to grow. So it's actually encouraging younger trees, and these trees are fully mature trees. So get your Grinsel's wood, number 3 in your number 3 here, and put it into a glass, and let's have a look at it.
So if I'm right in saying, Gerard, you basically just went the long way around in telling us that there will not be 32 counties of Grinsell wood. There won't be 32 releases.
No, and they won't all be from Kilkenny either. The first 2 are from Kilkenny, and I know Kilkenny people are very proud of themselves, and you might say Kilkenny's a big county, but unfortunately there isn't a huge amount of oak forests in Kilkenny. The Bluebell forest from Castle Blunden, lovely people as well, really nice people, and beautiful house as well. They're in the north of Kilkenny, but it's amazing how different, and we'll see that in a minute, how different the 2 whiskies are, because it's really just down to oak trees growing in different soil and a slightly different climate. It's just mad. And they're only. Yeah, go ahead, Brian. I want to reiterate the point that this is why I said make sure you leave a tiny bit in the glass, especially now when we're coming to the Grinsel's, to the Dair Ghaelach side of things. This is where it gets really kind of interesting to be able to decipher these, in my opinion. Yeah, no, absolutely. So what you're going to taste is a 15 to 22-year-old pot still whiskey that has been finished for less than a year, because, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because Irish oak has a more open structure, so there's more interaction with the wood. So they had to watch it really, really carefully. So it is a 15 to 21-year-old pot still that was exclusively aged in first fill bourbon. So it's, again, all that bourbon, no sherry, no European oak yet, because technically, obviously, the Irish oak is European oak. And give you an idea of the porosity. You think of something like Quercus petraea, which is the Irish oak we have here. Now these mightn't mean anything, but let me explain to you. American oak is about 49% porous, if that makes it. So 49% of it is porous. Irish oak is nearly 57% porous.
Oh wow!
So it's there's a big difference. American oak is Quercus alba, which literally means white oak, and Quercus is the Latin name for oak. And I'm not a tree expert. I want to point that out. It's whiskey that I'm kind of known for. So if anyone asks me any really tricky questions, but what I can tell you is, when you think of American oak, so it's good to compare this to Barry Crockett, because they're quite a similar age profile and quite a similar makeup as well, excluding the Kilkenny. Look at this unashamed plug for business. This is
Did
just,
you ever see that? No.
man,
Look,
that
I
is
had to
just,
share it. He's not even, I wouldn't even say he was embarrassed slightly. Not
no,
even. I can actually probably, I can hear him laughing.
he's in his little van pulled over somewhere on the way home to Kerry. So anyway, so John Fleming's Carry Out in the Reeks and Killarney. Get in there. They close at 10:30 or 9 o'clock.
Now that's a plug. That's a plug.
So I'd as I said, I'd much rather be in a pub. And I think if you can, like, you know, supporting the pubs is going to be so important. So if we can, I think we should all support pubs. I won't plug it any more than that, but I really can't wait till the on-trade get a bit of a chance to reopen, and we
soon,
are
hopefully soon. We're all, I think we're all at that point now.
So if you have your Barry Crockett legacy, and because again, similar whiskies, you know, and then you have your Grinsel's Wood. Now, I should also point out this is cask strength, so approximately between 57.1% and 57.9%. 3.3 was 57.9. This is 3.7, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, this is 3.7. Yeah,
3.7.
Yeah.
3.7. So
I have the wrong ABV then.
Oh no! I'm saying it's between 51.9. Sorry, 57.1 and 57.9.
Okay,
So
I wrote down 58.1, so I must have given myself the wrong information, which happens more often than I'd like to admit. But
but it's like 0.1, like I don't know, and you're probably right and I'm wrong. So it doesn't.
I doubt
doesn't
that
matter.
now. But anyway,
These are notes I made like 5 years ago. So so we're having a look at his cask strength. Okay. But what a different nose there is to it. It is just so
incredible.
Like heightened, you know, I'd say like a little bit of acetone, but then you have this beautiful fruitiness to it. It really is very, very attractive. Cocoa.
Like I'm getting banana, pineapple.
Really exotic, rich fruit. Yeah, that type of note.
Even there's a kind of that darky kind of note to it, like the coffee kind of note to it.
Yeah, and it's
beautiful
like
oak spice,
vanilla fudge.
Yeah,
you know.
Very light, kind of even a very kind of light, which may or may not be, but a light kind of raisiny nose, very, very light.
Honeycomb. But that coffee. Yeah, those coffee beans are really coming through for me now. You were
exceptional. You wouldn't think if you were to compare that to the Barry Crockett's legacy now, you would not think that was bourbon casks. It has a hint of the Dair Ghaelach. Excuse me, and I said this to you earlier.
Yeah, the Virgin American oak. That's what's tricking you, in that you're getting a full impact from the wood compounds that are in both the Barry Crockett, although it's 46%, and the cask strength Dair Ghaelach Grinsel's Wood. So you're getting this full kind of impact on it, you know. But it has a much more open structure. It
really is beautiful.
And there's a compound in here called furfural, which is really high in Irish oak. The reason Irish oak is actually even more open than, say, Galician or French oak is simply because trees grow a little bit longer in Ireland every year, because we get more light in the summer. You know, the way it's really bright here, and also it's also because our winters tend to be very mild, and our summers also tend to be not very intense, unfortunately. So, you know, we might think, Jesus, it's roasting today, but actually the ambient temperature in Ireland doesn't fluctuate that much. So it's a really good environment for trees to grow in. So let's have a sip. Sláinte to you all.
Absolutely. Sláinte. Cheers, lads. Cheers, everyone.
Oh, wow. I just love that whiskey. It is smooth, but then alcohol kicks in. fudge,
Yeah. Fudge, I have
dairy
that.
milk, dairy milk chocolate. I always say, but like some people are always
Yeah.
telling me no, it isn't. But I like that kind of like the
No, but I
old
get that.
dairy milk chocolate, that kind of
It's
tanginess
almost
to it.
like that tanginess, nearly almost kind of like uh, that dryness that the chocolate creates sometimes, that kind of aftertaste.
And it's
Gorgeous.
like
Standing.
Demerara sugar. Um, like, can you feel the tannin on the top of your mouth? It is just
Yeah.
incredible. The wood tannin as well.
It's
Fudgy
way
wood
more
tannin.
oily, way more thick, way more kind of dense on the palate. There's there's an
More
awful lot going on.
concentrated.
Very complex. Yeah.
Complex, concentrated, and delicious. I love that. That is
Wow.
really, really nice.
That's
Yeah.
a wow whiskey.
And let me explain to you about the packaging, because this is something that people have often asked. Why isn't it in a box? Because the whole idea behind Dair Ghaelach was to highlight sustainability, to highlight our wood management program and the amount of effort we go into only sourcing 100% sustainable wood, our funding of sustainability projects in Spain and Portugal, the United States, in order, to have wood that is, we need trees and we need it in the future. And the idea of the packaging of Grinsel's wood, Dair Ghaelach, is it is made from recycled material. It's compostable, the box, and it is basically it was basically hated by people because people wanted a big box, because whiskey drinkers are obviously not aware that there's a climate crisis and want a fancy box. So they did go back to a box with Bluebell Forest and with the oh God, what's the latest one? Jeannie Knockrat Estate.
Knockrath. Yeah.
Yeah, from County
Well,
Wicklow.
I think that sometimes as whiskey drinkers and from a broader perspective, standing outside and looking back in, I think people, when it comes to drinking whiskey, miss some of the finer details or the finer points from time to time. And as you said, you see it with this, what was the story with the packaging? And, it all has to tie into one another, really.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, this is the thing. It's just absolutely incredible, the amount of effort that has gone into sourcing our wood. So there was a gentleman called Brendan Monks, and he was our blender and our head of maturation, the guy in charge of all the warehousing, the barrels, the bond, all that sort of stuff, back in the 1970s. So essentially, the new distillery is built, and historically, you would have had cooperages in Cork, in Cork City, obviously where Gerard Buckley started, and then he moved out to Midleton. You had a cooperage in Dublin. You had barrels coming into Ireland from cognac, from Spain, with transporting sherry, not just seasoned barrels coming to Ireland. And this dies out over the 50s and the 1960s. And by the 1970s, there was like, God, we really need to get more of these barrels. They already realized this in the 1950s, and a delegation from the Pure Pot Still Producers Association, which included representatives from, all the main distilleries that were left in Ireland at the time. You had, I think, Allmans and Bandon, you had Jemison, you had Powers, you had Cork Distilleries Company, you had Bushmills. I'm trying to think of the rest of them that were still there. I think there was a representative from Coleraine, and all these guys went over to America and they signed a contract with the American whiskey producers in the 1950s to buy their empty barrels, because, as you know, since the end of Prohibition, you have to use a brand new American oak barrel every time you make Kentucky bourbon or Tennessee whiskey. So
Yeah.
no one was drinking Irish whiskey in the 50s. No one was drinking American
No.
whiskey in the 50s. So they had loads of barrels and we needed them and we bought them. So that was fine, that end of things. But when it came to the other barrels, the wine casks that we used to have lying, that were readily available, they weren't readily available anymore. So Brendan Monks had the really, really tough job of traveling around to places like Madeira, sitting on the terrace of Raffles Hotel, sipping Madeira wine and doing deals.
What a tough job.
No,
Yeah.
I know he seems a very unhappy man the last time I met him. And then
I would imagine so.
And then, he went down to Jerez and had, they went and met the cooperage there we've been dealing with for 3 generations, the Pius Labato cooperage. The sawmills, Pius Morella's, their bodega season our barrels, as well as Lustau and other sherry houses. And then he went to the Malaga wine producers. So all of these components that we have for like the likes of Yellow Spot, the likes of Redbreast, you might think, oh yeah, they just happened. It took decades ago to actually line all that up. And then a young Billy Lighton went with him just over 20 years ago, and Billy would have built up those relationships, and then that was handed over to Kevin. Then when Kevin joined us, took over from Brendan Monks. So, what I'm trying to get to the point is, this is we literally sourced the barrels when that had gone. We literally now have to go source the barrels, but that means that we can engage in a project like the Dair Ghaelach project, because you're able to fell a tree in Ireland, put it on the back of a lorry, and put it on a boat, the lorry on a boat, bring it down to Spain, and then get it quarter sawn in the sawmills we've been dealing with for 3 generations. We put Gerard Buckley on the lorry, whether he likes it or not. He went down there and he supervised.
I doubt it's a lorry now.
I would say a private helicopter, jet. More like I don't know. But Gerard went down, supervised the barrels that were used here. There was 48 hogsheads created from the 7 trees. Oh no, there's 9 trees. Sorry, 9 trees. So 9 trees in Grinthos Wood. And basically, Gerard had to supervise each tree getting cut into rough stays, palletized, and they're all kept separate. Because you imagine if they mixed them up, the whole idea that you can take your bottle
defeats the purpose. Correct.
Defeats the purpose. So, and then Gerard would have gone into the cooperage and supervised to make sure that all the barrels were put together. Now, 18 months later, because these had to be left outside. In Jerez.
They're cut in Barilla in Spain, isn't it? There's a sawmill in Barilla, Spain,
Galicia,
the north.
Yeah, up the north.
Okay,
so north of Portugal. And then, as you know, you might know, but on the Atlantic coast of Andalusia is a province called Cadiz, and there's a big port there, an ancient port called Cadiz. And inland, about 30 minutes inland, is Jerez de la Frontera, and Jerez de la Frontera is where the anglicized name for sherry comes from. So when our forefathers or English speaking friends across the sea in England saw S-E-R-E-Z, they pronounced it Jerez, and then eventually that Z became a Y, it became sherry. So that's where the word sherry comes from.
Interesting. Wow, I didn't know that. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, so the Spanish letter Jota, or J, it was misconstrued as an S. And then sherry, or Jerez sack, as it was called, because the first time it came to England was when it was sacked by that fella, Sir Walter Raleigh. He basically went in and smashed the place. And he used to have estates, I believe, in North Kilkenny, in Queen's County and Kings County, which are Laois and Offaly as well.
Yeah.
But that's.
Can I ask a question? Just before I forget, and I'm after forgetting. So there's a couple of questions that are coming here, and while I think of mine, you might answer another. But I just want to say to everybody who's watching that don't be afraid to throw your questions in there. Now is the time to ask the questions, especially to get them answered. First question comes in from Darren Riley. Can I ask about the different tree numbers? Would there be a big difference between 1 through 9?
Honestly, no, there isn't, because they're from the same forest. They're literally from meters apart from each other. So there's only one set of tasting notes for all the trees. I think the big difference is actually the number of barrels that came from each tree. So there is trees that are rarer than others, and it's also because so the whiskey itself, the same base whiskey, went into those 48 hogsheads. So those, these barrels, 246 liter barrels. There was the same base whiskey went to all 48 of them, and then was then matured for that just under a year in those barrels, and you get this big impact from the Irish oak. And so you're not going to get a huge difference. There is a slight difference in ABV, and there is, subtle differences. Some people have different preferences, but how often are you going to get a chance to taste them all side by side? Not very often.
Very rare.
Ever, really. And also there was one whiskey that only went to South Africa and 2 that went to America. So the problem is that 3 of the trees are actually in 750ml bottles. I think it's 1, 3, and 1, 3, and 4 or something like that. I'm not sure, to be perfectly honest. So it is. So collectors have gone mad trying to get them from America.
Collector's nightmare.
Yeah, nightmare. So because that was another learning. There was a belief in Midleton. Sure, no one would want to buy all 9 trees at €280 a bottle. You'd be mad. Who would do that? And of course, loads of people wanted to do it.
What were you thinking at all up there? Down there, I should say, from here.
Well, it's just a belief that people, not believing how big whiskey was becoming, and really just not, not expecting it to Midleton to grow so fast. Like Midleton in Ireland grew last year at nearly 60%. Isn't it incredible? Like
that's incredible when you see it. Yeah,
it's just So, and we're looking at Dair Ghaelach launching 6 years ago, nearly 6 years ago. So
it was 2015, wasn't it? Yeah, it was the first, the first one, the Vincent's Wood. But I remember my question that I was going to ask. It was the other evening, and I was watching a series on Netflix. Not a series, sorry, a movie on Netflix called Neat. Did you ever see it? It was about the American bourbon industry.
No,
it was fascinating. They're actually at the.
Sorry, is it by Chuck Cowdery? Bourbon Neat.
I can't remember who the director was or any kind of. I just remember the name was Neat. It was all about the bourbon industry in the States and how they're actually trying to regulate and change some of the measures with which the use of casks, because bourbon in the States can only use virgin American oak, right?
It's a protectionist reason.
Yeah, which leads me to my question: how does, at current times, the Irish whiskey industry, because we rely so heavily on American bourbon casks, how do we see that moving forward? Because they're trying to regulate it now that they'll be able to use second fill and first fill and all these, and not just virgin oak. I mean, down the road, surely we're going to see a problem with the availability of some of these casks. Yeah,
well, we've had a contract with them since the 1950s. So I would be confident that we will personally, as a company, we would not have a problem. I think the difficulty is that Kentucky, you can make bourbon anywhere in the continental United States and also in Hawaii. So you can make bourbon in Alaska, you can make it in anywhere you want, but you can't make Kentucky bourbon anywhere. And that's the difference. So Kentucky bourbon, I don't see changing. And as far as I'm aware, Kentucky bourbon and Tennessee whiskey account for 90% of all American whiskey, if not more. So I can understand that if they do change the regs, that might happen in a distillery in upstate New York, or in, say, Whistle Pig or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's not going to. I don't think it will affect the main producers. And the big one is Jack Daniel's is number 1, Jim Beam is number 2, and then number 3 whiskey in the US is Johnny Walker Red, and number 4 is Jameson. So I don't see by volume that really affecting the supply. I think it'll affect the secondary market in the United States. I know that's kind of a little bit of a, but we also don't just buy barrels. We buy American virgin oak barrels as well. As you can see, we buy we taste at Barry Crockett. We buy barrels from the cooperages directly in the US as well. So, we also we're working on sustainability projects in the eastern continental United States with foresters and sawmills. So, I mean, we're trying to future-proof it, is what I'm saying to you, Brian. So if it does change, but I don't see it having a huge effect on the Kentucky bourbon industry and the Tennessee whiskey industry, which is the.
But now that you mention it, I think it was kind of more geared towards some of the craft distilleries that were popping up.
Exactly it.
Right.
And there's thousands of them. There literally is thousands.
Thousands.
There's 1,850, and that was probably 2 years ago. I'd say there's multiples of that now. You go to Texas alone. I was in Houston. I was in Austin. I was in Austin in 2018, and there was little distilleries all over the place. There was even a mezcaleria at the back of a bar that I was in. So it is something that there is these craft producers all over the United States, but they're tiny. Again, I just stress that them, and a lot of these craft producers are buying from MGP in Indiana or from other big distilleries until their own stock becomes mature. So kind of a similar idea of what happened here in the past. So yeah, I think it's a great conversation. I think it's a great it's great to look at it and think what's happening. But for the answer about will it affect the wood supply, and I can only speak for Midleton, I don't think it will, because we've worked a long time with these people, and we're working on other kind of resilience built in to protect us.
Well, maybe at some point further down the road for the kind of smaller side of distilleries. I mean, it's of course it's a possibility. Anything is possible.
Of course.
And you see it from day to day. Things change constantly. But look, it was a good observation that I made when I was watching the movie. It's called Neat. It's on Netflix. NEAT. If anybody gets a chance to kind of tune in and wants to up their knowledge on a bit of bourbon history, it's quite good. It's very well directed. It's very well produced. And it kind of gives you an insight into that side of the pond. But just about the whole cask thing, when you had mentioned it, I thought that was very interesting to try and bring that up and specifically ask. But I mean, Midleton and Irish distillers in general are a huge corporation. Of course, their contracts are going to be solid, So I don't think we have anything to fear from your side anyway.
No, well, we're certainly part of a big group, which is Group Pernod Ricard, but Irish distillers, I wouldn't call us huge, and I think that anyone that's visited Midleton will probably see that it is a very, very hands-on operation, and there's a huge amount of craft and skill that goes into producing these whiskies. So we don't have like a magic computer whiskey machine that we just press a button. It's still a very old. It's a very traditional process, and the wood is a very important component. Kevin O'Gorman would have said in the past that it was the most important component to the whiskey. But I mean, if your base spirit is not of the highest quality, and the grain that goes into it isn't of the highest quality, and your barrels are not of the highest quality, your outputs are not going to be the highest quality. And I would say that our ingredients, our wood, and our processes are world class in Midleton, and they're the envy of many of our Scottish cousins across the water. And if all your inputs are super high quality going in, your outputs are going to be super high quality going out. And that's
it's funny.
No corners.
Years ago, I actually did a course in my previous life before coronavirus. I was a DJ, and I did a sound engineering course there for a couple of years. And
cool.
The resounding, it was fascinating now in terms of sound and how sound travels and works with microphones and speakers and all that kind of stuff. It was fascinating. I mean, I'm guilty of being a bit nerdy, but the one thing the sound engineer had always said on the day: shit in, shit out, which means if you put shit into a microphone, well, it's going to sound shit coming out. And it's the same when you come from, what you're doing and in a distillery. If what you're putting into the distills is shit, it's going to come out shit. I mean, it's.
Strangely enough, I would have come from it from the angle that the what you put in is of the highest quality. You'll get the highest quality coming out. But I know
Yeah, well,
exactly
see,
where you're
I
coming
was of the
from. You're
difference
right.
because
Yeah,
I was being schooled, you see. So, and unfortunately, we didn't get very nice, very nice kind of sayings about stuff like that. We were told the hard way, don't put shit in and you won't get shit out. So obviously, but it translates across so many mediums. I mean, it's the same in any, like a bar business. If the hospitality and the service and is poor, well, then you're going to have a poor representation from the people on the other side of the bar. They're not going to enjoy it. I mean, it's the same in any business, really.
yeah, no, absolutely. And look, it is it's one of those things that they're almost obsessive about quality, really, and that's the thing. You'll find that people are when you see the amount of testing that goes on to the water, the amount of testing that goes on to the grain, like even when the barley's grown in the field, they test it, like, I don't know, I think it's tested 6 times before it's even harvested, so it's
Wow.
absolutely crazy the amount of work that they put into ensuring that the quality is of the highest level. And they made a huge effort in the early 1970s to kind of change, to ensure that the quality, that the processes were all down, because if you think about Irish whiskey historically, it was a bit inconsistent, and it made it nice and interesting and all the rest, but like, it wasn't consistent, and if you taste something like the Redbreast range, which I love, I'm obsessed by it. I have a bottle of Redbreast 10-year-old from the early 1970s, and it's like one of my most treasured possessions. But it's really a great historical, interesting whiskey, and it's really juicy and limey and a bit of history. But we make much better whiskey now today, so that's the way I'd be looking at it. And there isn't a whole lot of that stuff lying around either. That's the mad thing about it.
But it is very interesting to go back and see how they used to do it. Obviously they didn't have the certain quality control systems that we have in place nowadays when it comes to production. And not even that, but even just the science behind it, and it just wasn't there. I mean, now at times, like, how many scientists do you have working below in Midleton that can go through and pick apart whatever characteristics of different grains that you're using?
Here's the crazy thing, Brian. When I started in Irish Distillers, and before we do that, I think we should pour our next whiskey, because I'm worried that people are dying of thirst out there, Brian.
Yeah, you're right. We're getting carried away. I'm overly excited.
Number 4, Bluebell.
Yeah, just before we do that, though, Ger, I think I was informed that is it your birthday this week?
It was my birthday. Yes, it was. Yeah.
It was your birthday. Well, now look who copped it. The only man in the group to actually say it, Carry Out Killarney. Huh? Happy birthday, Ger.
He's a good man. All we said off air about him now, I take back.
That was all you said, actually. No, in fairness, now I had his back because he was standing next to me. He was down socially distanced, far away.
I called him an F and F, I think, or something. I think it was terrible, the language I used. I apologize right now. So
I can't remember really, to be honest. I have a short memory. But what would 21 is it, Ger? 21 or something along those lines, isn't it?
45, would you believe? So
wow.
Powers Distillery was still distilling when I was born. So that's how old I am. Jameson had stopped distilling 6 years previously, but I was Powers was still going at the time.
Well,
so that's how old I am.
Very, very happy birthday to you, obviously.
Thank you. Thanks a million. And what better way to be spending it than having a chat about something I love? So thank you very much. And
your birthday, the weekend of a 10-year anniversary of Barry Crockett's legacy.
Yeah.
And we're drinking Midleton. How bad?
It's pretty good, isn't it? And the weather has been the best.
Exceptional.
Best weather
and
of
it's
the year,
Saturday night.
Yeah. And it's Saturday, so we can't go anywhere else. So people are stuck with us. So
right.
And we were talking about the lab, right? And as people are putting number 4, Dair Ghaelach Bluebell Forest, another Kilkenny forest. So from Castle Blunden, they're north. Is it about 10 minutes north of Kilkenny City, Brian? Right in saying.
I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, sure, because I'm not entirely sure, to be honest with you, because I was never there.
Well, one was south of the county, so Grinces Wood is
Yeah,
definitely south. And this is, as far as I know, 10 minutes north of the city. So still County Kilkenny, but very, very different influence that you're getting on the whiskey. So it's a lovely kind of castle out there up in Castle Blunden estate. And Paddy Blunden inherited it from his uncle, which was nice. So they're one of these lovely old Anglo-Irish families, and they, again, remember I was telling you about the oak forests.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of other land around those forests were cleared, but these families that have been there since the 1600s now, so there are Irish families, like we're all blow-ins really, and my family, I'm a Huguenot, Norman, Halleys, Garlands, they're all weird kind of wonderful names. And basically, the Blundens family have been in Castle Blunden since the 1600s. And the reason it's called Bluebell Forest is because the forest itself actually has, if you go to it, or when you go to it and you're living in Kilkenny, and if you can visit it, the forest itself has bluebells that will basically cover the forest floor at a certain time of the year. It's really cool. So that's why it's called the Bluebell Forest. So they are again 130-year-old Irish oak trees, and it is another Irish virgin Irish oak bottle, and we've tree number 4, which is 56.2%. The age, the ABV goes from 55.3 56.3, and there's 6 trees, and they were all available in Ireland this time, so we didn't make that mistake before. They were also available in markets like the United States, the UK, and UK, and maybe France as well. I think that was it. There wasn't a huge, and travel retail. So Dublin Airport, Cork Airport would have had these as well. This whiskey, as opposed to the Dair Ghaelach from Grinces Wood, which was 15 to 22 years, this is 12 to 23 years of age. Again, natural color, non-chill filtered.
So these are all natural colors. Dair Ghaelachs are natural colors.
Natural color, non-chill filtered, as is the Barry Crockett is non-chill filtered as well. And so for me,
you left out the coloring part.
Oh, sorry?
Is there a bit of color in the Barry Crockett, is it? Or does that fall into line with the rest of them?
It is, yeah, there is. There's color adjustment in Barry Crockett, and Midleton very rare as well. So these, obviously, because they're virgin oak, there's no need for color adjustment, and Barry Crockett doesn't really need any because of the virgin American oak. It's only if it's an option that they won't say if it is or not, because they don't want to pigeonhole themselves, because it's a clear bottle and you don't want huge variation then between batches in color. So, but it doesn't. From talking to the blending team, it needs very little color adjustment. But this is natural color. We have a look at the color there.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful, rich color. And again,
very rich, kind of dark amber.
Yeah, really more intense color even than the Grinces Wood.
I would say even a brown, kind of even. But this is a different type of pot still, isn't it? This is, I believe, the Grinces Wood was a heavy pot still. This is light and medium pot. Am I right in saying that?
That's right. Yeah, this is light and mod pot. Grinces Wood was light and mod pot as well. So it is the Grinces Wood, but there is just a different proportion of pot still in here. So
it was light and medium pot in Grinces.
Yes, but it is.
Okay, sorry, I got that one.
It's all American oak again, but there's a different proportion of the 2 pot stills in here. The next whiskey we're going to try actually has all 3 in it. That's the Knockrat. So Knockrat has all 3: Trad pot, and it's also older as well. So the ages are different in the base whiskey. There's a slight difference in, the proportion of light, the type of pot still, light pot still, and the medium pot still, and then also it's a different forest. So it is a different whiskey, but it is still getting that impartation of the Irish oak. Now let's dive in and have a little nose. This is 56.2%. If you want, you can add a little bit of
absolutely incredible. This is
it's even more complex, isn't it?
It's just so
Sweet,
lush.
Yeah, and it's got that chocolate, the chocolate we talked about before, that dairy milk type note to it. The honeycomb, definitely there.
Yeah,
the coffee,
demerara sugar,
but it isn't as there's like there's more of a red berry note, like a heightened sweetened red berry type note. I don't know if it's not raspberry or strawberry, but it's leaning towards that type of red berry. Could even be cranberry, or that sort of note. But but the pineapple and banana is there as well, but it's not as pronounced as in the Grinsel's Wood. I'm gonna get
I get way more raisins on the nose than
rich
you
red
wouldn't
fruits,
be you wouldn't be stoned in the center of the town to think that could have possibly maybe come from a type of sherry cask.
Yeah, but it didn't, as we know. So it is, Irish oak, really, really interesting, contributing, just bringing it in a different direction. Because it's a different forest, you're getting much more of a, that red berry note that you didn't have in the Grinsel's Wood. Although there is the same vanilla. There's loads of vanilla in this Irish oak as well, which is that vanilla character. But the honeycomb, it's just there. Get that honeycomb. It's even more apparent than the Grinsel's Wood, which also had honeycomb. Coffee beans are that bitterness is in there. But that red fruit you talked about, raisins, is it strawberry, is it raspberry, deep red fruit. But the pineapple and banana is there, but it's much more suppressed because the red fruit.
I get the pineapple. Yeah. The pineapple is kind of definitely behind it. So
let's have a little sip. 56.2%. You're all
absolutely
very tough whiskey drinkers, but do put a bit of water in it if you do find it a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, don't be afraid, lads. If you want to put a bit of water into it, by all means, launch it.
Now this is there's much more creaminess than we had in the Grinsel's Wood. Grinsel's Wood had much more of a pot still, and then a fudgy, that kind of buttery. There's more of a balance between the pot still spice transitioning into the wood spice. It's much more forward on the palate than the Grinsel's Wood, which was much more. The wood spice was much more the other side of the middle of the palate. It is still quite robust, but it's more round. It's still very mellow. There's a clovey type note to it. The fudge is there, but it is more creamy fudge than the the kind of sugary demerara fudge that we had in the Grinsel's Wood.
I would even say, Gerard, that this borderlines goes on sticky toffee for me. That kind of a sweetness. If it was trying to, instead of like the demerara, like it's not demerara, obviously that's pronounced, but it's yeah.
But you're getting this oak kick at the back as well. It's like it's so different, isn't it? It's amazing, like how different it is. I'll go back to the Grinsel's Wood.
Yeah, even Grinsel's Wood now is coming.
I would say, do you know what this is here? This is my opinion now. I'm not saying this is the opinion of Kevin and Brian Nation and Gerard Buckley, but for me, I think the Grinsel's Wood has too much wood influence in it. This is more balance between the pot still and the wood. The Grinsel's Wood is a huge kick from the wood, which even on the nose, you're getting all that tannin and fudginess, and that vanilla is really, really apparent. Like it's just overwhelming the whiskey. Whereas this is
so very decadent. Yeah, the Bluebell is just so decadent.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous, yeah.
So that's
And do you care, when you're going towards and when you're drinking, would you? I should say, sorry. Let me start again. When you're drinking cask strength whiskeys, would you be inclined to add a bit of water, or do you like to? Me personally, you know, I'm not a big water adder fan. I don't like ice. I don't, you know, and teach their own. I have no problem with whoever wants to. But I have tried a number of times opening it up with a drop of water, and all I find is that it just brings more of the sweetness forward. It kind of gets rid of the real kind of what I would find is character of the whiskey. Would you be inclined to add as much add water to it, or are you kind of a purist? Do you like to stay as it is, or?
So the first time that I taste a whiskey, or a whiskey that I haven't tasted in a long time, what I do is I will taste it neat. But more than likely, I'll add a bit of water afterwards to let it open up, to soften the impact of the higher alcohols in the whiskey, to allow me, supposed to appreciate the different component flavors that are in there. So that's the way I approach it myself personally. Um, you know, I do drink a lot of in the course of doing the job, which is a really tough job, as you can imagine, Brian.
I can imagine, yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough. So I do get to taste a lot of cask strength whiskies, but if I'm drinking a whiskey on my own, I tend to drink 40% ABV whiskies most of the time, whether that's Redbreast
Okay.
12-year-old or like Redbreast 12-year-old is just fantastic whiskey, you know, and you know, Black Barrel is my other kind of go-to whiskey, and both of those are 40% ABV, and one is a blend, you know. So I mean, I find that cask strength whiskies, I love the intensity, the flavor, but the problem is I find that they will, even now, I haven't drank a huge amount of whiskey. I find that they have quite an impact on me. So um, I have the opportunity to be able to go and taste these all the time, and I do love them. But I think when I'm having a couple of drinks, I tend to drink something a little less of an impact on me. But the way I do drink a cask strength whiskey is neat first, you know, try and appreciate it, because they're usually quite concentrated in flavor. They're usually
It
quite
can be, yeah.
intense, and like they're beautiful, and they also tend to be a lot rarer because, and although there's a lot more of them coming along the line, they tend to be rarer because there is a narrower audience for them. You know, it's a growing audience, and that's why we produce more and more of them. But for me, that's just the way I would approach them. I mean, that I'm spoiled for choice. I have so many whiskies that sit under the portfolio, you know, and sometimes I'll even drink competitor whiskies, but I won't tell you who those ones are.
I was just going to ask. I was going to say to you, what's your favorite, would say, non-Irish distiller's product? But you're probably not going to want to answer that, are you?
No, Black Bush, I'd have to say. I think it's a totally great value, really, really good whiskey, you know.
Like
So
that
yeah, that's
80% malt, 20% grain content in the Black Bush.
yeah, it's
It's
really,
incredible.
really, really yummy, really nice whiskey, you know. So yeah, no, I've no problem. And that's the great thing about Irish whiskey. There is variety now. Like when I started
Yeah.
in Irish Distillers, there was no variety. And there was a tiny, like we only not relaunched, like Redbreast is 30 years made, um, you know, from grain to glass by Irish Distillers. Prior to that, we sold the pot still directly to W&A Gilbey's, who matured it, you know, right up to 1984. They were bottling, maturing Redbreast. And since 1991, we've distilled, we've matured, and we've bottled Redbreast. But it came back into the Irish Distillers portfolio, if you want to call it that, because it was with Edward Dillon for a while. It was with Fitzgerald and Company for a while. It came back in-house in 2001, and like I remember this fella Barry standing up in front of me with this new product they had at the time, which was Bush 16 was the new product, as well as this Redbreast whiskey, and then the latest vintage of Midleton Very Rare. That I had no idea who Barry Crockett was, and they were there talking to us. and that was the introduction of kind of like let's look at more premium whiskies. And if you think about that's 20 years ago, and you look at the amount of premium whiskies that are there now and the amount of pot stills, it's just absolutely fantastic to see that growth year on year. And it is I'm spoiled for choice is what I'm saying, and it's there's wonderful variety within the Irish Distillers portfolio, but within the individual families, the Redbreast range, the Spot range, and the Midleton range that we're getting to taste tonight, you know. So yeah, that's my twist on it. So what I'd if there's any questions on Bluebell, on Prince's Wood or Dair Ghaelach, you know, I'd love to answer them. I can answer anything about the
Lads,
production.
if you have any questions, put them down below. Instead of you're all slagging each other here now. I can see it, and it's great crack.
As creamy as cream. Okay, lovely.
As creamy as fancy scones. Could you imagine now if this was in a Zoom meeting? It'd be
chaos.
There'd be chaos.
There'd be fireworks and rockets going off in lads' living room.
This is exactly the reason why I decided to go with this platform for those lads. But I'm glad that they're enjoying it. Lads, again, if you do have any questions, now is your opportunity to ask. Gerard is completely transparent, as you've seen. I asked him a couple of questions. There's no problem there whatsoever. We're laid back. We're having the crack. It's Saturday night. We have some great whiskies here. We're coming, sadly, into the last of them. And
but I tell you, the thing is that we've got to taste the whole Dair Ghaelach range. We've tasted, so the core whiskies within the Midleton family are Midleton Very Rare, which vintage changes each year. Barry Crockett is the constant, the linchpin that they rotate around. And then there's a new Dair Ghaelach coming out every year. And there is going to be another Dair Ghaelach. I'd nearly be very, very confident that there will be one before Christmas. So it's just, you know, depending on the current situation, basically. But, you know, hopefully we'll have another one. And we're going to taste the latest one, which is the Knockrat estate. So
I love how you put it. Hopefully there will be another one before Christmas.
Yeah, no, it's you know, and we have felled, you know, we felled the forest this year. We did last year, the year before. So there are Dair Ghaelachs to come. But
great.
When the trees are felled, Brian, they're put in the back of a lorry. They're brought to the sawmills in Berea. They're shipped down to from the Madabar sawmills down to the Labato cooperage, Pies Labato cooperage in Jerez de la Frontera. Those staves spend 15 months outside, and then these 130-year-old oak staves are then made into these hogsheads, and then they're shipped back to Ireland, where they're filled with the pot still whiskey. So you think about it, if we fell a forest today, it's not really for another 2 years that whiskey goes into it. So
yeah. What should they need? They do need time to dry out, and they have to be kind of
yeah. And then in the case, it's to cure essentially, and so you get fungal and microbial activity on the wood that allows it to cure, be safe essentially for consumption. You know, so it happens naturally under UV light, under just, you know, the heat. The moisture content is also reduced in the wood from being outside in the Spanish sunshine. Like, I've been in Jerez in the end of September, and it is absolutely roasting. You know, it was, you know, over 30 degrees when I was there at the end of September, you know, so it's a really hot place. So what I'm saying is, forests that we felled 3 years ago are only maturing whiskey now for possibly next year or the year after. So do you understand? So it's quite a long process.
It's quite a long, arduous process. Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
So Knockrat, for example, that we're going to try now, that was launched this year. Knockrat was, or not this year, sorry.
No, it's 2020.
2020. So in the middle of COVID, everything seems blurred. So
actually, it was before COVID, because I remember I was here in Christie's, and I had it. I think it was in January I sat down and he had just gotten the bottles. It was along with the Redbreast 27 that came out, and he had two of the same bottles, and I put the two of them next to each other in a tasting here. It was incredible.
The two different was it the two different Knockrats or the two different?
Oh no, the two different. So you had the Redbreast 27, and then you would have had the Knockgrath Forest. I can't remember off the top of my head what tree it was. Like, I mean, you know, it doesn't really matter. But
No.
I had the two of them side by side, and it was.
Yeah, it's really yeah. That's if you have that opportunity, it's great to. But the differences are so subtle because they're, as I said, they're from the same forest and all that sort of stuff. You know, it's quite difficult to see the huge difference between the two of them.
Well, if anybody wants to see the difference, they're here in Christie's Bar when we eventually open now, and that's a plug.
Oh no, and I'll be first in the queue. I'll be down, coming down the road as soon as I can to basically, you know, enjoy
what
Christmas offer. Definitely.
Oh, yeah, so, and I'd even buy you one. Sit here and we'd talk shite whiskey for the night, for the crack.
Well, is that not what we're doing now, Brian? I think we're.
Yeah, but you know, we do it in person. It's a little bit more personable when you're able to do it in person.
So, number 5, we're going to try, and it's tree number 3, isn't that right? I think.
Correct.
So
yeah, tree number 3,
number 5, tree number 3, and thanks again, Brian, for pulling all this together, and the bottling that you did, and these lovely tasting packs that you sent out to everybody as well. Really, really cool.
Did everybody get their decanter caps? Is what I want to make sure that everybody got everything that was specifically for this tasting, because I came across an extra decanter cap sitting on the counter after I bottled everything, and I said, I just want to make sure that everybody got one. So look, it wasn't just me. The lads here in Christie's, you know, they bent over backwards to make sure that all this kind of comes to fruition, and that everybody gets a fair shot and gets to enjoy these certain whiskies that would normally be kind of unreachable.
Yeah, to be out of people's, you know, just the cost of them, the
for sure.
collectibility, you know, so it's, and the limited nature of them as well, you know, so there was less of the Bluebell made of Grinsel's Wood, you know, so it meant that, and also there was only 6 trees, yeah, of the Grinsel's Wood, of the Bluebell, I should say, and there's only 7 trees of the Knockrats, so there's less, you know, it is a similar amount, but not as much as the Grinsel's Wood, which was the initial one, you know, and it was much more the Grinsel's Wood, like, so it was the first time they'd done it. So in the case of, you know, Bluebell, they were getting a little bit more knowledge about it, like the way things worked, the way Irish oak worked. The first Irish oak that we knew of in over 100 years that had been used in whiskey. So, or the first new Irish oak that had been used, because again, there's not a lot of it around. So, you know, we've a different whiskey again here, and like, it knows is so different than even
it's so different. It's way more.
It's not as it's not. It's less dark chocolate. Is that it's better to say it's not as, it's probably just less of an impact from, there's less of that dark chocolate that you get in Grinsel's Wood, you know, the dairy milk I was talking about, which is a little bit different. You know, it's just,
there's more spice kind of going on in it as well, isn't there? It's not as rounded, would say, as the
I think it's more fruity. You know, there's more of that banana and pineapple fruity orchard, more orchard fruits maybe than kiwi, you know.
Why the rarity on Knockrath 7 is what Simon is asking now.
Why is there a rarity on Knockrath 7? Because there was less.
I'm assuming.
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was just saying, I'm assuming he means tree 7, obviously. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the rarity, because each of the trees, so when they get the trees, what will happen is that sometimes there could be a knot that's not visible or a twist in the wood that's not visible. When they fell the whole, the tree, that section of tree that goes on to become stays, and then when it gets to the sawmill, it'll be noticed by one of the millers who's an expert. These guys know trees, that's what they do, and they'll say, they won't even send it to the cooperage. They'll go, that's no good, the cooper will reject that. So you'll find that not all the trees produce the same amount of barrels. And in the case of the Knockrat estate, you just get less barrels of certain trees. So when they finish, when they put the whiskey into the barrels, essentially there's just less barrels of that particular tree. So that's why there tends to be particular trees that are rarer than other trees, so that's just the unfortunate. I know, but I suppose that's one of the quirks of it, really, but it's this family or another family, the Brabazons, are a big, they're a big landowning family in County Wicklow, and Lord Mead is David and Gilly's uncle, so he owns a Kilruddery house in Bray in County Wicklow. It's his summer residence, and they really are, like, I grew up I lived all over the country. I lived in Cork as a kid, and Meath, and and Dublin. But Wicklow, I lived in Wicklow and Bray for a while as well. And it's near enough to where I live now. And they've given huge amounts of land to the local community to build a swimming pool, to build playing pitches, tennis club. They're really really generous family, and Kilruddery House is a brilliant place to visit, but their estate is sprawling over County Wicklow. It's all over the place, and a lot of it's not really great farming land because it's very hilly. Wicklow itself is the mountains to the sea, so you have
that kind of rockery, and it's not great farming land anyway.
So Lara in County Wicklow is kind of in the middle of the county. It's you go up by the Sugarloaf out that way.
Vale of Clara, I believe it's called, isn't it?
Yeah, the Vale of Clara. So you have Lara is the town. It's a pub, a post office, and a river with a bench that you can look at it. So, and a little school. So that's basically the town of Lara. And if you go right, you're in Glendalough. It's literally that valley. Go to the right, the Glendalough, the valley of the two lochs, of the two lakes, and then you go left. It's the Clara Vale. So Clara Vale is to the left, and Tripperstown Hill looking down over it. It's quite a high-sided valley. So it's Kilkenny is a lot flatter, particularly the south of the county, and it's also, believe it or not, in these valleys it's actually quite dry. There's a lot of, they're glacial valleys. There's a lot of, soil is quite sandy. So you get a total different density and porosity in the wood, even though it's essentially the same type of oak. And that's what's given the difference. You're not getting that, the chocolate and the coffee,
Yeah.
There's loads more fruit in here, as I was saying, like orchard fruit. Like I keep thinking of like a pink lady apple, or a banana. Do you know what I mean?
It's very, very different behind it. Yeah, you have your vanilla. Yeah, it is zesty. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, it's a lighter toast as well than the other two whiskies.
Okay.
So lighter toast. You're getting, it's more subtle. So there's less temperature and less time applied to the wood, essentially. So you would think the reason that was done is because there's less porosity in this wood. So it's and it's simply because where it grew, it's a much more less light, less rain, less growth, basically. So it's a tighter grain in the wood. Like it's still grown in Ireland, but it's totally different. It produces a totally different whiskey. Isn't it just mad? So
do you take that all into account then when you're going to char the wood? the fact that where it's grown, the type of style, how much soil, excuse me, how much it produced and stuff like that. When you go to char it, it is a science. So when you're actually going to that stage of production, especially with the casks, are you able to tell them, well, we wanted this amount charred because we're putting this type of distillate into it, and we know what type of reaction that we want to get and what the result is?
There is a collaborative approach with both the cooperage and also the own expertise of our own team. So when the barrels were being made, Kevin, Gerard Buckley, Dave McCabe, and Finbar Curran all went down to Jerez La Frontera to see the barrels being made, and the decision was made there because of the obvious. The cooperage recommended a lighter toast because they said this is different than the other wood, and that's where the decision is made. And then when the barrels are brought back to Midleton, then the decision is made. Oh well, let's change. Okay. They changed the distillate style as well to reflect that. So it still is light pot, the mod pot, but also there is trad pot in this as well. And this accentuates. So it suits the cask style and accentuates the fruits. And I think the tasting notes reflect that we've discussed.
Yeah.
So
it's totally different on the nose. I mean, you could see what you had to work with, I suppose, when you go through it, right? So obviously what you're putting into it, and as a result of where the wood was coming from in the mountainous hills of Wicklow and stuff like that. So you had to obviously make changes throughout the whole process, and being the charring, the type of pot still that you put into it to come to what we have here now.
It's just it just shows you the expertise of these guys and the just incredible knowledge. But
it's nice.
Again,
it's nice to see that. It's nice to understand that, and I never knew that.
If we have a little sip, Sláinte. It's so much fruitier. It's got just an incredible viscosity in the mouth. It's mouth coating. It's spicy everywhere, and
it is very mouth drawing, isn't it?
Drying the front of your pants. It's more some
lovely coffee,
and the length is gorgeous. Slowly fading away. Little nod to the oak there. Just boop. It's just there in the background.
And then, the lovely spiciness. You know what I like about it is that the spiciness of the whiskey ties into what you would get on the nose. Ties in. The finish represents the palate, represents the nose. It's an excellently well-balanced whiskey, as were all of them, to be fair. But you see from the different process now and the amount of char and the different types of pot still distillate that have gone into it, outstanding. Really, really, really good.
Yes, you're very welcome. I obviously have nothing to do with producing this, but you know what? I'm so lucky that I've been included in 3 fellings in. Kevin O'Gorman, Gerard Buckley, Finbar Curran, Anna, who's working on the team now. They've been so generous with just including me at every stage of this so that I'm able to articulate to you the amount of effort and skill that goes into these. Like I'm very proud of it. I do feel part of it, but I'm obviously not involved in the producing of it. But I just admire the amount of effort and time that has gone into these, and it just produces incredible whiskey. It's ridiculous,
Martin McMahon put it quite good there. If you could only buy one of these, what would it be? Now, I'm going to take that as 2 parts of the question, right? So if you could only buy one of these as between Midleton Very Rare, right up to what we've tasted tonight, or, I'm kind of guessing that maybe it could be in the Dair Ghaelach series.
Yeah.
What would it be?
Well, for me, Grinsel's would. And the reason being is because it was the first time, it was an experiment. And from the first time I remember tasting it for the first time with the sales team in Kilkenny. Believe it or not, we were in Kilkenny before it launched. And I was allowed to show it to the sales team. We were in the New Park Hotel. New New Park Hotel, and we were in one of these conference rooms, and I had all my little bottles, and I just could not get over the smell in the room from it, and the color of it in the glass, and the stickiness of it, the how it was like that Demerara sugar we talked about. And so for me, it's Grance's Wood, but it's probably because I have a memory attached to it.
Well,
I'm
it was
not really
probably a lot
looking to
more
affect it.
exciting at that time for you, Gerard. I mean, it would have been the first time you would have done something like this in, Irish oak. Obviously, it would have been
Yeah.
a big deal around. Yeah, I could understand that. For me, I think I would go for the Bluebell. I
Excellent.
thought the finish on the Bluebell was incredible. I just love that. All through the whole experience was beautiful for me,
Yeah. Yeah. No, no. Listen, isn't it great that there's a difference? Imagine they all
isn't it?
tasted the same. You'd be going, oh, they all taste the same, which wouldn't be great. And it just shows you that
No.
the different forests do have a massive impact on the different trees. So you're saying basically the one from Kilkenny is the best one. So like you had a choice of three.
I mean, I'm in Kilkenny, so yeah,
Yeah. No,
and I'm not sorry at all about it, to be honest with you.
no, that's all right.
It just
Yeah,
is
but
what it is.
it is. It's great. But it's great to be able. This is a great experience for me, Brian, to be able to do this because I, don't often get like I did a Knockrat tasting with the Cork Whisky Society with Gerard Buckley and Finbar Curran last week, and that was fantastic. But they're all very similar because they're all, from the same forest, the same base pot
Sure.
still. And what's great, unique about this experience tonight with Christie's and obviously yourself, the Whiskey Chaser, is that you are getting to compare the whole of the Midleton portfolio that exists at the moment.
Well, no, we haven't
Really
really
unique.
brought in the single casks
Well, single casks are single casks. They're
yet.
yeah, yes, yeah. But single casks are by their nature single casks. Like these are,
Yeah.
Although each of the forests is is a unique launch. Dair Ghaelach, Barry Crockett, and Midleton Very Rare are all part of that Midleton Very Rare range. Whereas the single casks are Midleton single cask, like Redbreast single cask or Power single cask.
For sure.
They're one off. Whereas these are a little bit more than that because there are, they're different trees. They're different. It's a really interesting way of looking at it. So thanks again for pulling it together.
Well, look, thank you very much for agreeing. I'm sure I didn't have to twist your arm too much for you to come on this evening. It was an absolute pleasure having you. The amount of knowledge that you're able to share with everyone is not short of astounding when you come on, the internet like this and live. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Brian.
It was great to be able to taste these whiskies. Thank you so much to everybody that took part and bought the samples. Watch this space. The only thing that I can say is there's going to be some real incredible tastings coming up. We're working on things left, right, and center, behind the scenes, trying to, make it different and make it something special. And for the second tasting, and we wanted to do that, Ger, you're an absolute legend in the whiskey industry. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really, honestly, you're a wealth of information, and it really was phenomenal. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody, and see you in Christie's very, very soon, I hope.
Hopefully. And again, I'm not sure. I was rambling on there. I'm not sure I thank the lads here in Christie's. But, behind that, without them here, we wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you very much to the lads in Christie's, obviously. And I hope everybody here really enjoyed what we had to offer tonight. I know I did. It was an eye opener, and certainly, like I said, watch this space. Big things to come.
Look, I can't wait to see.
Jerry, you're the first on my list. I'll actually be in touch with you. I actually have a great idea after tonight now, and I have to run it by the lads to make sure that it's okay to go with, because it could cost a few pounds. But look, the main thing here is everybody gets value, and it'll be worth their while. So look, we'll be in touch again anyway. It's not the last time.
I'm definitely up for that, Brian. Let's
Great
do
stuff.
it. Whatever it
Great
is.
Stuff.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Once again, thanks again to everybody here. Thank you, Ger. Thank you, Christie's. Thanks to myself as well, because you know yourself, it's not easy putting these things together. So until we see each other again, stay safe and Slánda.
Iwa Griff. Iwa.
Take care. Thanks, guys.